much. I appreciate
His
it.
first board.
Okay. One other request I have, if you happen to have your cell phone with you, would you please turn it off so that we are not disturbed in Jack's presentation? Thank you very much. Okay, Jack, without further ado, it's yours.
Oh, gee. All right. First, I've written up a little something here I got to read there. When Mrs. Westgate, I guess I can call her Georgia, as I've known her since we were about this big, called to ask me about doing this, I told her that I didn't know much about Willseyville ancient history. After I hung up, I wondered how I was going to do this. Thankfully, my oldest son Mike, knows how to wring information out of a computer. He also done some research at Cornell's library. I thank him for that. Also, my wife copying emails. I thank her for that. I'm going to break this into two parts. Ancient, which almost all of the ancient stuff occurred before me. And recent history, which most of it occurred during my lifetime. I will try to bring up some things you didn't know or may have forgotten about Willseyville over the last 75 years, which is what I am, truthfully, 75 years old. Can't believe it. Plus a side story or two, so here we go. Willseyville sits, over these things here. I have to go by my notes. It's a good thing I'm doing this because no one else could read these. On March 7th in 1792, 800 acres of land were granted to a John Canteen. That area was known after that as Canteen Location, also known as Big Flats, spelled with two T's. There was two railroads, DL&W, which was the second railroad in New York State, and I don't understand this one, the Utica, Ithaca, Elmira one. Now, they joined in Willseyville, apparently because there is a separate railroad roadbed. As you go towards Ithaca, it would be on the left-hand side over by the woods. Now, this road was abandoned, or whatever you want to call it. The last train ran on there in 1935. But according to the records, it was known then as Lehigh Valley. Apparently they bought out, but I don't understand how Utica got tangled up with Ithaca and Elmira, but that's what this stuff says. They must apparently, like I said, the Willseyville Depot, you're probably not familiar with the street names, which there hasn't been named down way back then. Of course, there was no names until, well, heck, there was no names until about 1965 or something. And that was because the post office says we're going to deliver mail, we got to have a name for a street, so we had, before that, of course, I was carrying mail then. We had, our boxes were numbered. The first box it came to was number 1. The second box was number 2. The third box was number 3. That was fine until somebody come along and built something between 5 and 6. So then you had a box 5A, and then another guy came and you had 5AA. And so it was a good idea to change to addresses, because then we'd have some idea where it is. But that was the only reason. Probably we'd still be delivering to 1, 2, and 3 if the government had said we're going to deliver more mail that way. But anyway, the depot that was there that I remember, somewhere in here it says there was 2 depots. That must have been many, many, many years ago, because I have no idea where the second one was. The depot that I remember was at the end of the street. As you go into Willseyville, right before you start up the hill, you turn to the right, and it's way on the end. To the left.
On the right. It's on the right, guy.
No, wait a minute, Jim. You go down to the end of that road, The depot is on the left.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, how long you lived here?
Right.
You know where Kenny Strickland's trailer? You know
That's the other
Kenny-
depot.
You know where Kenny Strickland's trailer is?
Is that what the depot was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the feed mill was the other one.
Just wait, I'll get to that one too. So that is something I want to bring up. If there is any questions, don't be afraid to jump up or throw something or something, you know. I probably won't be able to answer it, but you can ask it anyway. I would appreciate it. All right, but at the junction of these two railroads, which was near that depot, is where Willseyville began. Someone by the name of Ezra Smith had a tavern and a small hotel there. That burned in 1812 or 13, but the land there was sold to a Morgan White in not until 19, I'm sorry, no, I didn't live in 18, so I'm hard to say 1860. Now he was a grocer, a manufacturer, a dealer in lumber, farmer, and of 165 acres of land somewhere. I don't know where he farmed all that, but anyway. But Jacob Willsey came to Herkimer County, from Herkimer County in 1815. Eventually became the Justice of Peace and the county judge. Now I want to read you something. I was trying to find out some information about Mr. Willsey. This is, well, it says this thing was put out 2 years ago. This lady down in Pennsylvania was trying to find out things about her great-great-grandfather. Her name was Leah Willsey Millard. And she wrote up this thing and copied this thing out of somewhere. She found it. I don't know where she found it. But anyway, it's apparently this Jacob Willsey worked for a farmer by the name of Isaac Post. And it says here, Isaac had Jacob working for him as early as 1826. Okay, now when I started that, I kind of wondered, what the heck is going on here? Supposedly, with this is the year one of Jacob's son was born. He worked and boarded with Isaac, drawing such comments as 1826, away to camp meeting. 12/17, 1827, Jacob about, they say he looks quite cross when went away to South Springfield, Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania yesterday. Had my horse gone all night, night spelled with a K, perhaps to see some girls. Did wrong spelled R-O-N-G, and not letting it be known that he was going to be away so that the cattle could have been taken care of. 12/25, 1827, Jacob away sleigh riding or keeping Christmas. 5/16, 1828, Jacob was out last night. Is a poor hand today, has not earned his victuals. He's being very contrary, and if he doesn't mend his ways, I must turn him off. This does not appear to be the actions of a married man with a family of 4 boys and 1 daughter. That should have told me something right there. On June 12th, 1830, he sent, Mr. Post sent 2 men to dig Jacob's grave. Okay, now up here it says, Jacob apparently died this morning of smallpox or some other disease equally as bad. But then I decided, this is not our Jacob Wilson. I thought it was interesting. And down here, later on down here, it does say that this was not the Willsey that settled in Willseyville near Camden, New York.
You've seen his diary, haven't you?
No, Georgia just asked me if I haven't. She's going to give me.
You should get that and read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's available.
I told her, she said she'd give me one, and I said I probably won't use it tonight. But anyway, Jacob Willsey came here from Herkimer County in 1815. Eventually became Justice of Peace and county judge. He had 2 sons and a daughter. There's an interesting thing about his daughter in here I'll get to in a minute. In 1838, he helped found the Baptist church in Willseyville. The building itself was built in 1840. In here it says, if the early records of this settlement can be found more complete in a bottle that was placed in the foundation of the church at the laying of the cornerstone, the same being written by Judge Willsey. So if somebody wants to tear the church down, they can probably find out what it's all about. I tried to find out when, probably, I'm sure this could be found out if somebody wanted to do a little more research, to find out when the post office was set up in Willseyville. But I could not find out from the information I had.
I think he was the first postman.
Could be. The only thing I could find, the oldest thing I could find was in 1872, Wakeman Smith was postmaster. But I'm sure it was because, in here other things, I'll read a little later, it lists there being a post office there around the middle of 1800s. It doesn't give a specific year, but. All right, also there was an Emery Mix, who was George's great-great-grandfather, is that right? Great? 2 grades?
1 grade.
Just 1 grade? Oh, okay. She knows. But he was apparently postmaster after this Wakeman Smith. The Smiths family, there was a million of them, well, not millions, but there were a lot of them. In 1827, I think it was, they were granted a 800-acre section ground. And they lived, they built one of the oldest houses in Willseyville, which I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate. I've lived in 2 of the oldest houses in Willseyville in my lifetime. One of which was Smith's and the other was Willsey's. Now Smith's was the house was across from where the gas station is now. That was built in 1842. The only reason I know that, my wife and I owned that a while ago, and in the abstract, which is about that thick, it gives a lot of information. I wish I still had it. Of course, we sold the house several years ago. It gives it a lot of information, which is history in there. It tells about different things that the Smith family did and so forth, but I don't have it anymore. They received, what was it, 1,200 acres they got from their grant. That's a long time ago. They built a house in 1842, it says 1841 on here. They donated 3 acres of property for the Smith Valley Cemetery, which is still active. Well, the reason I can say that, there's a cemetery in Willseyville that's not active anymore. Georgia knows where it is. Roger knows where it is. Are those stones still standing up there?
Not many, I haven't been up lately, but a lot of them are laying down. We stood some of them up years
The
ago.
last time I was up there was a wooden fence built around one. Was that still there?
I think so.
Of course, the last time I was up there, I think was probably 1945. Did you not? That was just before I had polio.
That was about 100 feet behind our bedroom.
Yeah, that's the reason I knew you'd know where it was.
So where is that?
Where, you know where Fred Marshall lives?
Yeah.
As you go up the hill to go down to Wilsonville, there's a house that's on the left. Roger and Georgia built that house. And it's right out behind there. Right on top of that knoll. I want to tell you a little story. This is a side, one of the things I call a side story about that. In 1945, a cousin of mine, smile, you know what I'm going to say. That's my sister back there is telling me.
I know what you're gonna talk about.
My cousin from Owego come up to spend a couple, 3 days. And my mother was complaining about, we had a garden out back of our house, which the animals were eating up. So my cousin Bucky Andrews, you might have known him, he had the restaurant, or snack bar, or whatever you call it, by Turner's Bridge, was built by his father and mother. And if you ever went there and bought a Bucky burger, that's where it came from. Okay, he came up to spend a couple of days. we decided it was on the bank out beside of our back of our garden, there was a woodchuck hole, and we decided if we set a trap and caught that woodchuck, we'd take care of my mother's problem. So we went out there and set a trap, you know, they have the chain with the ring on the end of it. Set the trap, and the next morning we went out to see how we made out with a woodchuck, and we get out there and here's a black and white woodchuck in there. Well, of course, you know, he and I are both, well, he was a year younger than I. Unfortunately, he passed away about 10 years ago. But we couldn't decide what we're going to do. So finally, I don't know, it was his idea or my idea, got a long stick. Somewheres in my lifetime, somebody had told me, of course, we used to trap quite a bit. Bill Staubach and I used to trap muskrats and mink. So I knew a little about traps, but somewheres I had heard that if you get the skunk's feet off the ground, you're safe. It is true. Try it sometime. All right. I told Witch this story once too. Did I tell you this story?
There were several.
All right, so we get a stick and we put it through the ring of the trap and we pick the skunk up off the ground, and here he is. I mean, he's got his hind leg in there. No, you know, don't worry about it. But what bothered was when I walked in the kitchen with my mother, that skunk in that trap. You know, they say about mind's eye, I can still see her face. So of course we were gently persuaded that there was nothing to do, so we took it out. And then we had a quandary. How are we going to get that thing out of there? So finally we come to the idea, we hung the skunk chain and trap and all on the fence, and then we stood back and stoned the poor thing until we stoned it until he was dead. So what are we going to do with it? Cemetery right up on top of the hill. So we took him up to the cemetery and we dug a hole, and we went and we found just a flat rock, and we wrote on that rock, and we stood that up and covered up the thing, you know, and that. So if anybody, I was just going to say, if anybody goes up there and trips over a stone, please say a prayer for that stone. And my sister will verify that I did this. I've done a few strange things in my life. All right, that's one of the side stories. All right, Frank White. Frank White applied for a patent for a chair he invented. And just a minute here, let me see what the date was on that thing. 1884, I believe. How about September 17, 1884, he applied for a patent for this chair which he invented. All right. He was granted a patent on December 1st, 1885. Here's such one of his chairs. This is a little different than this one. But what this is, it's unbelievable. It's a good idea he had, I guess. This chair, of course, he's got a sore foot, but it's 125 years old. When you get to 125 years old, you probably have a sore foot. But you notice that the back is supported and the legs on that side are all one piece. All right, well, this one here that he has, this thing all the way over here, both legs, or all four legs, and the thing on the front here, or the circle, are all one piece. Now, there is an amendment in here which allows him to build this chair. This chair, my wife and I don't remember where they came from. We have two of them. The other one's in pretty rough shape. This one's, other than a sore foot and a broken rung, it's not bad. But like I said, it's about 125 years old, I would say. We think it came from my wife's home, which had a lot of antique stuff in it, and we're not sure, that was a long time ago too. But someone told me at the time, wherever we got that chair, that it was built in Willseyville. Tried to find out where the chair factory was. Georgia says she might have some idea, says her great-grandfather bought the building. He had a 3-story building, 35 feet wide and 85 feet long. Can't find out, haven't been able to find out where it was or what happened to it, whether it burned or they just went out of business and tore it down or what. Cannot find out where it come from. If anybody knows where that building is, I'd be glad to.
Howard has a picture.
Pardon?
Howard has a picture of it.
Oh, yeah? That's great.
He brought it, yeah.
That's great.
Chances are it's in several houses in Willseyville.
Could be. Entirely possible. Entirely possible. 3 years later, he applied for, well, no, he didn't, because on the top of the, see, I have the application for the patent. It says here, Frank Asa White of Candor, New York, which is a lie. Louisa, Frank lived in Willseyville. Louisa F., of course, that was part of Candor, wasn't it? Yeah.
Town of Candor, yeah.
Louisa F. White, administrator, and Morgan A. White, administrator of said Frank Asa White's deceased. So apparently he died between the time he applied for the first, well, he applied for a patent for a folding table. Apparently he was into circular things, because he's got a circular thing here, and look at the chair, he's got circles all over the place. But apparently this was quite a going thing, because it said in here somewhere that he had was selling 30,000 chairs and 10,000 tables per year. And it also says he had 40 hands. Now, I don't know whether that means 20 people with 2 hands. I mean, you can figure out what he's talking about. But apparently it was quite a successful enterprise, because, like I say, 30,000 chairs is a lot. That's 600 chairs a week. I mean, plus 10,000 tables. I don't know, I have no idea how long that he was in business or anything. It was he and his 2 brothers, what was their names? Edward? Charles and Edward. Charles and Edward, his brothers, lived in Candor. He lived in Willseyville. I don't know whether you're at all familiar where the creamery, well, the building is still there. It used to be, there's a bridge just to the right of the creamery as you go down the side road. It goes up over, Ruthie Hoos lives there now, and, well, that's where Frank White lived.
Hand Hill, they call it.
Yeah. And Morgan White, who Georgia says was his father, lived a little farther up on Hands Hill on the other side, on the left-hand side of the road. It's on, oh, by the way, there's a map there, which belongs to Dan Starkweather. He brought it over, let me look at it, and it's, there's a lot of places there, houses are named where people lived. You'll need, if somebody wants to look at it later, there's a magnifying glass, because there's very small print. But according to that, I kind of thought maybe the building that he had would be somewhere near his house or something, but I don't know. I can't tell you. Okay.
You know the name of the company that made the chairs?
White
Brothers.
Brothers Chair Factory.
Unique.
All right. Of course, Jacob Willsey built the house that the retired postmaster lives there now, Pam Maslin. Just past the post office on the left as you go up through Willseyville, going towards Ithaca. The big house, it's on the left, that's the Willsey house. I lived there from 1936 to 1943. It was quite a house. I mean, for the time back then, I'm sure it was spectacular. One thing that was unusual, when we moved in there, it had a dumbwaiter. And I don't know, there's probably other houses around that have had dumb waiters, I'm sure they don't now, but I never heard of one around here, but that one did have. While we were there, those 7 years, they tore that out of there. The house, when we lived into it, was owned by a man by the name of Archibald Benedict. I have no idea who he is. I have a listing in here, which people can look at if they want later on. I have a listing of the post office, people who were in the post office, being served out of the post office. I have a whole, I don't know how many there is, I didn't count them, there's a whole bunch of them. And Archibald Benedict's name is in there, and it says he's a farmer, which could be, but this listing, I think, was around around 1900, so, of course, that was only 36 years. I suppose he'd still be kind of alive. He was this Archibald, unless maybe there was a junior, I don't know. But he owned the house when we lived there, I know that. The attic was full of antique stuff, which wasn't ours. I mean, it was stuff that he left there, or I don't know whether he lived there just before we lived there or not. I have no idea who lived there. That house, at the time we lived there, had a wing on the end towards where the post office is now. There was an apartment in it. In that apartment, when we moved in, or shortly after we moved in, the minister for the church across the road moved in there. His name was Wallace Stevens. And he and I used to have quite a time. There was a big barn there at that time. Now that's been gone for 50 years or more. But on the side of that barn was an opening. It's kind of like a woodshed, place to store wood. He and I used to go out and sit and whittle in that woodshed. And I used to like to do that because he always came out, he had this little bag, and he had these little cinnamon candies that he brought. And they were good. I'd like to have some today. I don't know, they were about the size of a nickel. The inside of it was white. But he always...
No, it hasn't come.
Oh, it hasn't got here yet either. Don't give it back to him. But anyway, and then he moved out of there, and I don't know, maybe some of you knew Doris Austin, used to be a teacher in school. Her and her husband moved in there. Jack and Doris lived there. They were living there when we moved, which would have been 1943. During the time that we lived there, of course, the schoolhouse was right across the road. One of the teachers, Esther Cunningham, she boarded at our house. Eventually, she married one of the Lucianis, and then moved to Canada, Hubbardtown, or where you call it.
They call him Kiki, I don't remember his right name.
I can't. I know that was Kiki, but that's the reason I didn't say which one, because I couldn't remember his right name either.
Lived in Nichols eventually.
Yeah. Speaking of Luciani, I'm sure you remember the father, Jim Luciani. The one, we got him a beat. Ever went to basketball games when he was around, or town baseball team, you knew he was there. I remember one time when we were living in the Willseyville house, he drove in with his truck. Of course, he dealt in cattle and stuff. He drove into our driveway there, and I remember, I don't know whether my mom went on, assuming she did, went out and he looked at, he opened the back of his truck, and he had tin plates in there with meat, selling his meat. Try to do that today. Or you get out of your driveway, they'll be happy. Yeah, that was quite a good one. Yeah. It's a good picture, Howard. You didn't take it, did you?
That's a copy of the postcard. I passed that around because it's not.
Well, anyway, let's see where we were going to walk here. In 1941, 3 bridges were built. The one that they just replaced, the road across the bridge. That one was built, and the one just above the gas station, and the one up where near Paul Hardesty at the junkyard. Those 3 bridges were built that year, 1941. 2 of the guys who were working on there come from out of town, and they roomed at our house. Planning on building the road in 1942, and of course they had a minor interruption called World War II, so that didn't get built until 1948. No wonder I can't tell where I am. That school across the road, I attended that from 1938 till 1942. Some of the kids, I heard this, I don't know that it's true, I was told that some of them used to ride the train to school from up there, to Camden. Is that right?
I hear about it. I
I've heard that.
For high school.
High school kids, well, the grade school kids, of course, went up
Yeah,
there. but-
Russ Manning told me that he would get a month's pass for $1.37 or something like that. And he had to walk down the hill.
Oh, yeah, it's quite a walk.
And get on the train, go to school.
And walk back up there.
Walk back up and do the chores.
Yeah. Well, that's bad. And speaking of Russ, of course, that creamery was up there, and he used to bring his milk down to that creamery. In wintertime, he would bring it down with his 2 mules with a bobsled behind him. So, I mean, that's something you don't see too much anymore, is a mule with a bobsled behind him. That was cool. That creamery, speaking of that creamery, of course, that closed in, what, 19, Roger?
Yeah,
When did that close?
well, let's see, I worked
When did
there-
you work there?
I worked there in 1958,
Yeah, I think it was about,
about a year.
it was early 60 when it closed. wasn't
It was about 63.
it? Cub Dents bought it, or Olin Dents, whatever you want to call him.
Bill Henry, I worked for Bill Henry at the time,
Yeah,
Gary's father.
yeah. Where's Gary? Not here?
He's interviewing students for Masonic scholarship.
Oh, okay, all right.
He's
I
really
have
sorry he couldn't be
I have
here.
a sheet I want you to take home.
Okay.
Has some information about the lodge 150 years ago. So, anyway, that creamery, I don't know whether they did that when Roger was working there, probably not. They probably had refrigeration by then, but
Yeah.
back before that, you had a dam on the creek, which is right over behind the creamery, and they used to bring this machine up and cut the ice. They used to dam it in the fall, and they cut the ice. And of course, the kids in Willseyville, me being one of them at that time, went over there, and they would give us a long, I don't know, 6-foot stick with a metal point on it. And after they cut these things loose, we'd push it along in the creek. They had built a chute from that went up over the railroad track and down into the back of the creamery, where they put it up with another winch. They put it up like the silo doors. They closed the doors as they filled it up, and they covered it up with sawdust, and that stuff would last until next winter, hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
There's only one problem. You notice I said it was across the railroad track? The railroad train comes along twice a day, so you gotta be careful. They had to build that section which they could take out, you know, and let the train through, and then they, but it was quite interesting. I was only 10, 11 years old then. I was surprised. I should have been surprised that they let kids do that, but there was 2 or 3 of us that got a big kick out of pushing those chunks of ice around, because they were big. I mean, they were probably, I don't know, probably 2.5 foot wide and 5 or 6 feet long and 8 or 10 inches thick. And so, I mean, they were quite heavy, but it was quite.
They put those stainless steel bulk tanks in about 1956, I think.
Yeah,
then they had all stainless steel piping.
Yeah, right, well, but it was amazing to me that that stuff, that ice would last most of the year. I mean, you know, of course, they had it buried under a lot of sawdust, but you would still think that it would thaw.
That pond is still pretty much there.
Yeah, I imagine, I wouldn't be surprised what, of course, there's no planks in it, but I wouldn't be surprised what that dam is still there. I haven't been up in that
You
area,
can
of course.
see the water down the back of the Andrews farm.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, nowadays, if they went to do that, the government would be after them, where they put the first plank in there. I don't know that it hurt anything. All right. Well, like I said, that was closed in early sixties, then Cub Dents bought it, he sold it to Audrey Strickland. Audrey put an apartment in it. And I rode over by there the other day, first time in 20 years maybe, I don't know. Of course, you can't ride by it anymore, the road is all grown up. But the building looks like it's falling down, so I don't think there's anything going on there now. The building is still there, but
Didn't they hold auctions in there for a while after they closed the creamery?
they might have, that was probably Cub Dents.
I didn't ever go, I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, they might have built.
When Audley first bought it.
Yeah, it could be, could be. That road, like I said, the road that goes by the creamery there, I think that used to be the roadbed for this second railroad. And that road went along across back up to towards where the depot was, and then turned left and goes back over to the main road. And when we were kids, we used to run around that block, figuring it was a mile. I don't know that it was a mile or a half mile or what it was, but we always thought it was a mile. It seemed like a mile when it got done. But
That
now,
track came from Spencer, didn't it?
pardon?
That track came from Spencer.
Yeah, I went around the end of right by Carol's house, and went around the end of that house, hill. And now, of course, Tony Izinga's got a house built in the middle of the road, the railroad track. But, yeah, I don't know, years ago, someone tried to tell me that thing was called the ECN, Elmira, Corning, and something else.
Northern, Elmira, Corning, and Northern.
In Northern, okay.
and Northern.
Cortland, excuse me.
Okay, all right, but.
But it later became the Lehigh Valley.
Yeah, well.
Which one was the one that was Owego, Ithaca?
That's DL&W.
Oh, that was,
Yeah. That's, I mean, I don't understand, now this map over here, I was talking to Dan this afternoon, we think that's about 1860, that map. And it only shows one railroad on there. So I don't know where that second one went.
Well, it was long after that they built it.
Well, it says here, the junction was there in 18, what did it say that? 1812 or 13. It was a junction of two railroads.
Trouble is, it wasn't even DL&W. The Ithaca and Owego wasn't built until 1834.
There is so much contradiction on this stuff. You read this stuff, and one guy will say, this is what happened, and this is when it happened, and the other guy says, no, it didn't, it happened some other time.
We're recording you, Jack, so this is that now.
I give up. All right. Okay, where are we here? Like I said, we moved out of that house. Oh, wait a minute, there's one other thing. I don't know that my sister even knows this. Maybe she does. She's probably heard this stuff. When we were living, of course, she was only, what, 4 years old when we moved out of there. There come a time when this day there become a strange odor in the house. And it run for a day or two. Couldn't figure out what in the world was going on. And I don't know whether it was me, my mother, or my father, or who went into the place we used to call the living room, or the dining room. And of course, this house had 3 fireplaces, 2 of which had been closed up with, I don't know what it couldn't have been, I don't believe it was sheetrock. Maybe they made sheetrock back then, I don't know. But anyway, it was closed up. The other one was wide open in a room that they used to use as a tea room. But anyway, this smell occurred, and somebody walked into this dining room area, and in front of this one fireplace that was sealed up, there was a hole about this big with fire around it. Come to find out what that was, the soot in there had been smoldering. That's what we smelled. So it's very fortunate that we found that hole in the daytime instead of at night, because otherwise that house might not be there. Did you know that, Audrey? Okay. Darn, I found something she didn't. Okay. But it did, like I said, it had 3 fireplaces, had a huge, it still has, a huge chimney. So square up out of the roof, and down in the basement, it's much bigger, and there's almost what you would call a doorway, which goes into the bottom of the chimney. You could, without too much trouble, at least, of course, I haven't been in there since I lived there. Well, I guess I was in there once, but not in the cellar. But at that time, maybe it's not there now, but you could just more or less walk right inside the chimney. But I don't know what that was for, other than to clean the chimney, I guess, I don't know. But there was no door on it, it was just an opening. Maybe it was for a draft. I have no idea what it was for. Anyhow, of course, the mail at that time came on the train. Art Dykeman, who lived in the first house north of the church, on the right, had a contract with the government. He used to go over, he had a push cart, sides about so high where it was painted black. He had 2 wheels on this, and one wheel and no wheel in the front where he could lean it off, I guess, when he wanted to stop it or something. He used to go over every day, meet the train, get the mail, and bring it over to the post office, which at that time was located, this is when I can remember, was located in Bursel's store. I don't know how long they had been in Bursel's store. I did see a picture of 1927 that was in there then. And this was, of course, when we lived there, well, we lived right across from Bursel's store from 1943 until 1949. And he used to bring that over, excuse me. His wife, his wife's name was Celia. I had a dog. When we lived in the Willseyville house, I had a dog. I guess the one, I can't remember, I had 2 dogs. Remember, I had Peggy, and the one I had was Rex. That was a black and white. That dog barked quite a bit. One day when I was walking down the sidewalk in front, she was sitting on the front porch. And she told me that if I took some chloroform and held it over his nose, he wouldn't bark anymore. Never forgot. I didn't do it. Also, when I had polio when I was in the reconstruction home, she sent me a deepest sympathy card. It's strange. My mind retains strange things. That's my wife. She'll tell you. Anyhow, that mail came on the train. One thing that, of course, I've lived there since 1934. We moved there when I was a year old. We lived in a house over across, well, Craig Hogan lives in the house right now. We lived there for 2 years, and then we went to live in the house, in the Willsey house. But since I've lived in Willseyville, there's been 7 different post offices. You wouldn't realize that, but there has been. That moved, in fact, at one time, the house, or the post office was in the Willsey house. Ethel Manning lived there, and when Frank Burchell gave it up, she was appointed, I don't know whether it was full-time or temporary postmaster, and she ran the post office out of her living room in front of the Willseyville house. Well, she got so she couldn't see, she had trouble, something, couldn't see, so she had to give it up. At that time, they moved it over, we had the old schoolhouse, had been purchased as a community house, community hall, and they dug out on one end of the cellar and put stairways in there, and the post office was in the cellar of the old schoolhouse. And when I started working for the post office in 1962, that's where it was. Jim Bush's mother was working there temporarily, I guess. I don't know, I don't remember how long she worked. It wasn't very long, but she did work there. And then Marion Rose very shortly was appointed postmaster, and she moved the post office into her house. In 1978 or 79, Marion was appointed postmaster. No, she went to be temporary postmaster in in Geneva. She was a temporary postmaster in Geneva, New York. And then eventually she became full-time postmaster in Ovid. But when she moved or gave that up, of course, she didn't want it in her house, so they hauled a trailer in down near where the post office is now, when it's set parallel with the road instead of vertical. That was 1979, I think. 1990, they built the little post office across the road. We were there in 1990, they built that, and they had a 10-year lease, and at the end of the lease, Mr. Vanek, who owned the building, decided he wanted to double the rent, and I don't know why, the government decided they didn't want to spend money. That's unusual. So they put the one across the road, which we have now. So we had, like I said, we've had 7 post offices in my lifetime. Okay. Of course, during World War I, I hope you don't mind I skip around from here to there and all over the place. You can't follow me, just scream and holler, and I'll try to explain. During World War II, my dad was a air raid warden. That's when we lived in the Willseyville house. In the front hall, the government put a telephone in there. There was very few telephones around then. And if we had any problems with the Germans coming over there, we were supposed to call. Don't laugh, this is serious. All right.
That's the kind of stuff the
I
government
can
likes to
remember
spend
my
money on.
dad had some flashlights, which he put, I don't know, you call it friction tape, I don't know, then we used to call it tar tape, over the head, over the lens, so there was just a little slot where so the planes were going over, they couldn't see the flashlight. Now, I know a lot of you people in here know where Russ and Catherine Manning lived. They built a little lookout up in back of their, remember that?
No, but I know they have a cater,
Yeah, they put a lookout up in back of their house, and they had a little roll up on the roof where you could climb up there and look and see when those Germans were coming. I don't understand what they were going to bomb in Willseyville, but there was something there. I don't know what it was. There was something there. But anyway, of course, that was the time of rationing, which might be coming back again. I don't know. You don't have to ration it anymore. You can't afford to buy it. You know, speaking of gas, when we built that gas station in 1950, regular gas, 26 cents a gallon. And high test, which is all they had, was 28 cents. That was 1950. It's gone up a little since then. And of course, the rationing, there was sugar was rationed and all that stuff. Used to if you had a tire go bad on your car or truck, you had to go to Owego and apply for a permit to buy a tire. Tires then were made out of things, rubber that wasn't pliable as it is that we have now, and they used to dry out. And I know of 2 people in Willseyville, they may still be there, not the people, but they took their tires and they threw them in the creek. When they got new ones, they get one that they didn't need right then, they threw it in the creek until they needed it so it wouldn't dry out. Things are different now than they used to be. Maybe if somebody went and looked, they might still be in the creek. Of course, I don't think they are, because back then the creek was this deep. Now you can walk across without getting your bottom of your shoes wet. Anyhow. Sometime during, I don't know, it's probably during the war, this road show came along, and they set up a tent behind the barn, the Willsey barn. There was a space there, maybe 75 feet wide, and quite deep. They set up a tent, and they had to put on a show like a carnival type thing. There probably was, what, 75 people lived in Willseyville? I don't know. So I don't imagine that they retired on the money they made. But I do remember them setting that tent up. That, like I said, that this Willsey place was apparently one time or another was a farm, because that barn was a large barn. The kids, we used to get a big kick out of going up in jumping in the hay off of the beams. And Ezra Stevens, who lived in the Smith house across from where the gas station is now, he lived there. That's where my parents bought that place from Ezra and Anna Stevens. He rented that barn. He used to put hay and stuff in there. And like I said, I don't remember when they tore that barn down, but it was probably in the 50s or 60s. It was a long time ago. South of the, I told you there was an apartment on the end of the Willsey house. South of there, about where the post office is now, was a community hall. And they used to have dances there. I can remember laying in bed at night, hearing the music, the people dancing over there. And they voted there. I remember going in there, and when they were voting, they had a little miniature thing they had setting up on the table, showed people how to vote, had the levers and the little flop over thing. And there was a balcony in this building. Kids used to like to go up there and watch them. They had all these kind of meetings and stuff. We'd go up there and watch them. There was a stage on one end, had a backdrop that you could roll down, had a not picture, painting, I guess you'd call it, some kind of a thing looked like that. I don't know why they tore it down. I don't know when they tore it down, but I would think early in the 40s somewhere. Do you remember that, George?
Moved it to Canada. I thought he got mad about
Did they?
That's the story, George.
Is that the one that was Ferguson's?
Ferguson's. Ferguson's first place.
Could be, yeah. Okay.
So that was it.
I don't know why they gave up on it.
He got mad. Tom said he got mad over something.
He got mad over
He
something.
got upset with the community.
Oh, it was a private owned thing. It wasn't a
Yes.
community thing. Oh, I thought it was a community.
Well, that's what they
Did it
used
blow
it
up?
for, but he
Was it
built
Willsey's?
No, it was, Lane.
Lane, okay.
Alley Lane.
Alley Lane, okay.
I think, just out of my recollection, the one that they're mentioning that Harley came from Yires.
Yires, right.
It was a kind of a dance hall and roller skating rink and so on. And they
Okay.
moved it up the road there and Harley did, and made a house of it.
Could be, but anyway.
But this one that you're mentioning, I ran across references to it in the old Couriers, and I think it was torn down
Yeah.
eventually.
Well, from what they say, the guy that owned it got upset and didn't want it there anymore.
Yeah.
Which is too bad, because, I mean, of course, it wasn't only a few years after that that they bought the school for $1. from the Gander School District.
My grandfather, they bought it, Alley,
They bought what?
lights off, so they owned it for a very short period of time.
Oh, yeah.
There was a whole group of them,
Yeah.
probably 5 of them that bought it.
Well, I know it was there.
They used to hold plays and things there because that's how
Yes.
they,
Well, they had the stage on one end and
Yeah,
they
they
had
held
that backdrop that rolled down.
They formed a dramatic organization.
Did they?
my great-grandfather.
Photographs around. I think George had one of the family somewhere, a photograph of the player.
Oh, yeah?
And that's how they put the sidewalks through Willseyville.
Oh, yeah?
They held community dinners
Hmm.
and, where I lived, because it was large. And,
I didn't know until I got to looking through here that the house that you lived in was a hotel.
it was, yeah,
I didn't know that.
my great-grandmother ran as a hotel.
Well, I guess anybody that had an extra bedroom had a hotel.
He had his, work, and she had the hotel. And she had her money, and he had his.
That's convenient. Okay, let's see, where are we? Nancy's. I have listed under here miscellaneous things I wanted to point out, like the feed store. Warden and Scoy had a feed store up there on the, as you go around the block, that used to go over towards the creamery. There was a building there, at the time it was red. I don't know, can't remember who worked there, but they had feed piled in there, and in one corner they had a little room with heat in it. Other than that, it was cold in there. We used to go in there when we were kids, and go in that room and listen. There'd always be 2 or 3 guys sitting there talking. We used to go and listen to what they were saying. Of course, that building is gone now. There was a couple, 3 people that lived in the town that were trying to make a few dollars extra. In the house where Craig Hogan lives, there was a fellow by the name of Peters. He was a shoe repairman. In the house, I don't know who lives there now, but next door to the one where Bert and Jenny used to live, you know, between there and Strawbacks, that house where it used to be Eureka's. I have no idea who lives there now. There was a fellow by the name of, I don't know what his real name was, Tippy Stevens. He used to make baskets. He had a gizzywampus. I put that word, I patented that word, gizzywampus. My wife talks about that all the time. He said my gizzywampuses. He had a thing he sat on, he held this, I think it was ash, I'm not sure, I think that's what he used. And with a draw shave, he'd make narrow pieces, 1/4 inch thick or so, and then he'd weave them into baskets. And he had a barn out back, he put that in. We used to go in that barn, and my golly, he'd have baskets piled all over the place. I guess he was an older man, so he apparently was, I don't know whether he was on some kind of a pension or what, but I know he didn't make enough off the baskets to live on, but he had baskets all kinds, whatever he wanted, he could make baskets. And of course, George's aunt and uncle. Aunt Jo and Uncle Emery had chinchillas. I don't mean chinchilla rabbits. They have these little chinchilla animals that these coats are made of that you gotta sell your house, your farm, and all over to get. They raised, and believe it or not, they were in a partnership with a Mr. Umhauer, right?
That's all.
Don't ask me how I remember that.
Sounds bad.
Apparently he worked with Emery at IBM or something. And they had a bunch of these little critters run around in their barn. I remember I used to go in there once in a while. They had a whole flock of those things.
It was one of those get-rich-quick schemes.
Could be. I'm going to tell you about one of those things that I got tangled up in. My dad and I, about 1940, let's see, I got out of the Reconstruction home in 47, December, it must have been in 48. Dad and I decided we were going to raise some rabbits. We saw an ad in the paper where for $50 you could get 2 does and a buck, giant chinchillas. So we had 2 doses of buck, and then we had 10,000. Actually, the most I ever had, we had about, at one time, we had almost 300. But I remember, according to the ad in the paper, we could sell pelts, you know, so.
Besides the meat.
Yeah, well, we sold that to Atwater's Meat Market in Effingham. Every Saturday, we used to take any 8-week-olds, we'd butcher them and take them over. They didn't sell it as rabbit meat, it was called fauna.
Oh, what?
That was the name of it. So if you ever buy any fauna meat, it's rabbit. Okay. But the pelts, it said according to this ad, you know, you could, oh, man, we're going to have Bob Wells come up and truck our money. So, the first time we had a bunch of them got big enough, we skinned them off and scraped them and, you know, fixed them up and bundled them up and sent them to this place in New York City. And you know, we got a check that almost covered the post. Yeah. Almost, not quite, if I remember right. It quite covered the post. So, that didn't last only a year or two. But that where 300 rabbits would eat 100 pounds of rabbit pellets in a very short time. We still had them when we moved down to the house across from the gas station. There used to be a big chicken house there, and we had that full of rabbits. So, like I said, we went out of that venture. So I've been into those money-making schemes. In the 30s, late 30s and early 40s, Willseyville had a softball team. They had a blue jersey with orange sleeves with a big W on it. There was several of the local communities, I don't know who, Spencer, probably D&B, I don't know, had these teams, and they would come and they'd play. Their ball field was located beside of the schoolhouse. There used to be an empty field there where the little building is that used to be a post office. And I can remember going to those, watch those softball games. That's long gone, don't have them much anymore. Okay, what else we got? Well, I guess other than the fact that I ran out of notes. Has anybody got any questions? I mean,
Oh, have we?
Like I said, I probably can't answer them, but ask them anyway.
Speaking of getting this quick, how about, I can't remember his name, he had a silver foxes up. Herb Austin. Herb Austin, yeah.
That was Clarence's next door neighbor.
Okay. Did you ever get to see those foxes?
No, I didn't.
No?
No.
Oh, Clarence did.
Here's going to woodchuck field.
I had forgotten about that. I didn't know it, but I'd forgotten it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that after, you know how it is down when you get our age.
I know.
You get a short circuit in your head.
Tell me about it.
I have here a, all I gotta do is find it. A lot of these people misspell Willseyville. Got one L.
Oh, yeah.
That was the original spelling.
Well, there is a Willseyville like that in California. Every once in a while, when I was working at the post office, we would get, they probably got some of ours, we would get a piece of mail that was supposed to go to Willseyville, California. I had my wife searched the internet, and it's still there.
Yeah.
There is a Willsey, Kansas, but there is no other Willseyville, so we're safe. On the bottom last, I'll read you what this says here. It says, Abner A. Haskins. I have no idea where that store was. There were boots, shoes, flour, meal, extracts, and so forth. In fact, everything usually found at a first-class country store. Purchasers will find it to their interest to give me a call, as I don't calculate to be undersold. So way back then, the competition was.
Oh, yeah.
But I do have a list of the, like I told you, Carol, there's that. The that home, you can give that to him. It's not a complete story, but there's a lot of it in there. It's hard to believe how many people there is around here that, I don't, one thing I don't understand, like in Candor, I don't understand why at least one of these factories, industries, or something didn't survive. I mean, we've had, what, blanket factories, wool factories, shoe factories, glove factories. And there isn't one of them that made it. It's like this chair factory. It just didn't make it.
Well, they flourished for a while.
Yeah, I
They
know
were okay
that.
for a while.
I know that. You would think at least one would have made it through so we could add something to say, hey, look at us. Somewhere in this rubbish, I have, here it is. Willseyville Baptist Church, this church was organized in 1839, it says here, with 15 members, among whom were Jacob Willsey and wife, William and Martin Willsey, Warren Willsey and wife. Warren was one of his sons. The first pastor was Elder E. Kimball. What I have here, this is a whole list of the people who were in that post office. There's several sheets full of. If you want to look it over and see if there are any of your distant relatives are in there. It does list, like, the first name on here is Willis Ayers, Route 30. Apparently the routes, they must have delivered with the horse and buggy then.
Oh, yeah.
He was on Route 30, wherever that went. He was a carpenter. The next one is Allinson Banks, Route 31, farmer of 90 acres, it says. Nathan J. Banks, Route 31, farmer. John J. Barber, Route 1, leases of John Foote's 37 acres. I mean, this is all apparently the way they had it listed in the post office. And here's Archibald Benedict, as I told you, he's the one that owned that house, Route 30, it just says farmer. So, I mean, there's like James H. Heath, veterinary surgeon, notary public, and farmer of 6 acres. Hoos and Hasbrook. Now, there used to be, remember, Clarence, there was a Hasbrook that lived up on Cottrell, remember that? Where Jones house was, right? I don't know whether that's these people, they were a proprietor of a steam sawmill and lumber dealer, opposite depot, it says. So, I mean, I don't know who all these people are. Frank C. Hoos, Charles W. Hoos, farmer of 150 acres, and in Caroline 60 acres. I mean, I don't understand why they have all this.
Charlie was farming somewhere around the late 40s, I think.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's this one, because this is back in the 1900s.
Not that one.
Yeah. Yeah, he had, Charlie you're speaking of, had cows there behind the house where they lived, and then
I
they
have a
owned,
story about Charlie.
a lot of people had stories about Charlie.
My dad had a Woody station wagon, brand new, smacked in the Dodge station wagon. You remember this?
I remember it. Go ahead.
I think I was in 7th grade or something. I went hunting up there with George's father and my dad. He wasn't had any cat license on. We parked right at the foot of Hans Hill, right where you up the mountain there. And we went hunting. I think Emery owned that property at the time, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay for us to hunt there, right? But Charlie was farming that farm, leasing it. So we went hunting, we came back, that Woody station wagon was covered with cow manure. Charlie.
I remember that.
Somebody's out of town, he was gonna cover that Woody wagon. We did all the finish of it. And I remember them going over to, of course, Yuli knew him.
Yeah.
So Yuli said, I know who did that. He went over there and I thought he was gonna kill him.
He said, Charlie, that was the shittiest trick I've ever seen.
I'll tell you a story. Of course, his mother was Bigelow. Mrs. Bigelow was Charlie's mother. she had a fellow living with her, his name was Lee Clark. And he was working that land over there where you're talking about. He had a big garden over there, big. So he hired myself and, I don't know, 3 or 4 other young guys over there and pull the weeds out of that garden. And, you know, these young guys, they like to smoke cigarettes. I didn't smoke them, but these other guys did. Okay. So I'm up to Evans's Garage, which is another business that disappeared. And Lee Clark is up there, and he says to me, "What are you guys doing over there?" And I thought he was accusing me of smoking cigarettes. I said, "Nothing." He says, "That's right, and that's just what you're going to get paid." that's what we got paid. So if I ever die and go to where he is, I'm going to be after him. But we got the garden weeded anyway, so that's one thing that. Is there any questions, statements, or apologies that somebody wants to make?
Jack, I'd like to know a little more about Wallace Stevens, because he is my cousin's
Oh, yeah?
grandfather, yes.
Oh, yeah?
Carl Stevens'
I don't.
grandfather.
I can't tell you much about him.
Do you know when he came?
When?
When he came to the Baptist
I
church?
think he came right after we moved into that house, which was in 1936.
When did he leave?
He wasn't there too long. There was
Did he leave before Urban, or after, or right around when Urban came?
no, Urban was, there was one in between Urban and him. McMichael was his name. The preacher was in between them. But I can't tell you. Gene, do you happen to know? You remember Wallace Stevens?
I do. I think he left around, because McMichael was there in 41. So I'm gonna say 39 maybe. Yeah.
I think he left before we moved out of there in
I think so
42.
too, yeah.
But I'm not sure that this is just, the only reason I remember him because I like that singing. We used to buy a box of this stuff. He always had a bag of that in his pocket. Of course, I kind of helped him get rid of it before it spoiled.
How was his temperament? I mean, was he, you know?
He was a real nice guy.
Was he
Really was.
well, my cousin Chuck just told me that Uncle Liney, that's the son of
And his
Wallace.
wife was a nice lady, Gertrude.
Yeah,
Her name
yeah,
was
I've got Gertrude's obit, I found that in the paper, but he said that they had a big to-do, and Uncle Liney moved to, up into Canada for a while.
Could be, I don't.
Because they had a big fight over something, but Chuck didn't know what it was, and I was just wondering what the temperament of the old boy was.
Well, of course, I was only 7,
Yeah,
8
you were-
years
yeah, you
old,
were
so I
young.
mean, I wouldn't know whether he was ugly or.
And like to teach little boys to whittle.
That is out of my realm.
When did they have the dedication to him? Was it in 5960? At the church, they gave, the family gave the organ?
You got me.
Georgia, do you know? I just know going there and somebody served pumpkin pie and forgot to put sugar in it. They remember that.
My wife always put sugar in hers. No, real good.
Joan, I've got his obituary if you'd like to read it
Oh, I
sometime.
love it. Thank you.
All right. Well, we do have refreshments, so feel free to stay around. Visit, Jack will be here. You can talk
If
to
somebody
him.
wants to look at that map over there,
Got the map to look at.
there's a magnifying glass you can use.
New Canvas State.